Chapter 5. They ended up near the back of the homestead. That was what Chuck called the leaning structure of wood and windows, in a dark shadow between the building and the stone wall behind it. "Where are you going?" Thomas asked, still feeling the weight of seeing those walls close, thinking about the maze, the confusion, the fear. He told himself to stop or he'd drive him crazy. Trying to grasp a sense of normality, he made a weak attempt of joke. "If you're looking for a goodnight kiss, forget it." Chuck didn't miss a beat. "Just shut up and stay close." Thomas let out a big breath and shrugged before following the younger boy along the back of the building. They tiptoed until they came upon a small dusty window, a soft beam of light shining through onto the stone and ivy. Thomas heard someone moving around inside. "The bathroom," Chuck whispered. So, a thread of unease stitched himself along Thomas's skin. "I love doing this to people. Gives me great pleasure before bedtime." Doing what? Something told Thomas Chuck was up to something no good. "Maybe I should just shut your mouth and watch." Chuck quietly stepped onto a big wooden box that sat under the window. He crouched so that his head was positioned just below where the person on the inside would be able to see him. Then he reached up with his hand and lightly tapped on the glass. "This is stupid," Thomas whispered. "There couldn't possibly be a worse time to play a joke. Neil told Albie could be in there. I don't want to get in trouble. I just got here." Chuck suppressed a laugh by putting his hand over his mouth. Ignoring Thomas, he reached up and tapped the window again. The shadow crossed the light, then the window slid open. Thomas jumped too high, pressing himself against the back of the building as hard as he could. He just couldn't believe he'd been suckered into playing like a practical joke on somebody. The angle of vision from the window protected him for a moment, but he knew that Chuck wouldn't be seen if whoever was in there pushed his head out to get a better look. "Who's that?" yelled a boy from the bathroom, his voice scratchy and laced with anger. Thomas had to hold in a gasp when he realized it was Gally. He knew that voice already. Without warning, Chuck suddenly popped his head up towards the window and screamed at the top of his lungs. A loud crash from inside revealed that trick had worked. And a litany of swear words following it let know Gally was not too happy about it. Thomas was struck with an odd mix of horror and embarrassment. "I'm gonna kill you, Shuckface!" Gally yelled, but Chuck was already off the box and running towards the open glade. Thomas froze that he heard Gally open the door inside and run out of the bathroom. Thomas finally snapped out of his daze and looked off to his new and only friend. He just rounded the corner and Gally came screaming out in the hope stand, looking like furious beast on the loose. He immediately pointed at Thomas. "Come here," he yelled. Thomas' heart sank in surrender. Everything seemed to indicate that he'd been getting a fist in his face. "It wasn't me, I swear," he said. Though as he stood there, he seized the body up and realized he shouldn't be so terrified after all. Gally wasn't that big. Thomas could actually take him as he had to. "Wasn't you?" Gally snarled. Anne pulled to Thomas slowly and stopped right in front of him. "Then how do you know there was something you didn't do?" Thomas didn't say anything. He was definitely uncomfortable, but not nearly as scared as he had before a few moments earlier. "I'm not a doll, Greenie," Gally spat. "I saw Chuck's fat face in the window." He pointed again, this time right at Thomas's chest. "But you better decide right quick who you want to be friends and enemies, you hear me? One more trick like that, I don't care if it's you or your sissy idea or not, there'll be blood spilled. You got that, newbie?" But before Thomas could answer, Gally had already turned and walked away. Thomas just wanted this episode over. "Sorry," he muttered, wincing how stupid it sounded. "I know you," Gally added without looking back. "I saw you in the changing. I'm gonna figure out who you are." Thomas watched as the bully disappeared back in the homestand. He couldn't remember much, but something told him that he'd never disliked someone so strongly. He was surprised by how much he truly hated the guy. He really, really hated him. He turned to see Chuck standing there, staring at the ground, clearly embarrassed. That's Thanks a lot, buddy. Sorry, if I didn't know it was Gally, I'd never have done it, I swear. Surprising him, Thomas laughed. An hour ago, he thought he'd never hear such a sound coming out of his mouth again. Chuck looked closely at Thomas and slowly broke into an uneasy grin. What? Thomas shook his head. Don't worry. The shank deserved it. And I don't even know what a shank is. That was awesome. He felt much better. A couple of hours later, Thomas was lying in a soft sleeping bag next to Chuck on the bed of grass near the gardens. It was a wide lawn that he hadn't noticed before, and quite a few of the group chose it as their bedtime spot. Thomas thought that was strange, but apparently there wasn't enough room inside the homestead. At least it was warm, which made him wonder for a millionth time where they were. His time had hard time grasping names of places or remembering countries or rulers, how the world was organized, and none of the kids in the glade had a clue either, or at least they weren't sharing if they did. I lay in silence for a long time, looking at the stars and listening to the soft murmurs of various conversation drifting across the glade. Sleep felt miles away, and he couldn't shake the despair and hopelessness as coursed through his body and mind. The temporary joy on Chuck's trick on Galley had long since faded away. It'd been one endless and strange day. It was just so weird. He remembered lots of little things about life: eating, clothing, studying, playing, general images of the makeup of the world, but any detail that would fill the picture to create a true and complete memory he had erased somehow. It was like looking at an image through a half of a meter of muddy water. Looking at more than anything else, perhaps he felt sad. Chuck interrupted his thoughts. Well, Greedy, you survived the first day. Barely. Not now, Chuck, he wanted to say. I'm not in the mood. Chuck pulled himself up to lean on an elbow, looking at Thomas. You'll learn a lot in the next couple of days. Try to get used to things. Good that? Yeah, good that, I guess. Where'd all these weird words and phrases come from anyway? It seemed like they'd taken some of their language and melded it with his own. Chuck flopped back down in a heavy flump. I don't know. I've only been here for a month, remember? Thomas wondered about Chuck, whether he knew more than he let on. He was a quirky kid, funny and seemed innocent, but who was to say? Really, he was just as mysterious and everything else in the glade. A few minutes passed, and Thomas felt a long day finally catched up with him. He leaned the edge of sleep crossing over his mind, but like the fist had shoved in his brain and let go. A thought popped into his head, one that he didn't expect, and he wasn't sure from where it came. Suddenly the glade, the walls, the maze, it all seemed familiar, comfortable. A warmth of calmness spread through the chest, and for the first time since he found himself here, he didn't feel like the glade was the worst place in the universe. He stilled, felt his eyes widen, his breathing his breathing stopped for a long moment. What just happened? He thought. What changed? Ironically, he felt that things could be okay made him slightly uneasy, not quite understanding the how. He knew what he needed to do. Didn't get it. The feeling, the epiphany, the strange one, foreign, and the familiar at the same time. But it felt right. I want to be one of those guys that gets out here, he said aloud, not knowing if Chuck was still awake. Inside the maze. Huh? Was the response from Chuck. Thomas could hear a tinge of annoyance in his voice. Runners, Thomas said, wishing he knew where this was coming from. Whatever they're doing out there, I want in. You don't even know what you're talking about, Chuck grumbled, and rolling over. Go to sleep. Thomas felt a new surge of confidence, even though truly didn't know what he was talking about. I want to be a runner. Chuck turned back and got up in his elbow. You can't forget a little thought right now. Thomas wondered at Chuck's reaction, but pressed on. Don't try to, Thomas. Newbie, my new friend. Forget it. I'll tell Albie tomorrow. A runner, Thomas thought. I don't even know what that means. Have I got completely insane? Chuck laid down with a laugh. You're a piece of clunk. Go to sleep. But Thomas didn't quit. Something out there. It feels familiar. Go to sleep. Then it hit Thomas. It felt like several pieces of a puzzle had been put together. He didn't know what the ultimate picture would be, but his next words almost felt like they were from something else. Chuck, I think I've been here. He heard his friend sit up, heard an intake of breath, but Thomas rolled over and refused to say another word, worried he'd mess up the new sense of being encouraged, eradicate, and reassuring calm that filled his heart. His sleep came much more easier than he expected.